All right, we're good to go, Judge.
Okay, so y'all going to see me in profile because of the monitor that I'm looking at is different from the laptop that the camera's on. Members of the board are hereby advised of their duty under the State Government Ethics Act to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflict, and are instructed to refrain from participating in any matter coming before this board with respect to which there is a conflict of interest or appearance of conflict. So I'll ask if any of the members of the board are aware of any conflicts that they might have. Hearing none. And I see Ashley's with us now. Hey, Judge Dunstan. So I'll ask the approval of the July 7th, 2022 minutes. Does anyone have any corrections or additions to the minutes? If not, do I hear a motion to approve? Motion by Marissa. Is there a second? Second by Judge Dunstan. All those in favor indicate by raising your hand. All right, those are approved. And a review of the proposed fee schedule, Peter. I'll ask you to move to that. And you're on mute.
And that doesn't happen too often. So I've got a nice colorful one to share with you guys. Other than the one in the materials is not as pretty to look at. So we sent a proposed fee schedule, and I caution that this is still in a draft. I think that it's important that we make sure that we take the time to get this right, and that this the fact that we have delayed the rules from going into effect until 2024 does not create a rush for us to get this right. It's certainly something that I would like to share and make sure that everyone has a chance to have comments and input on this, but it's not. I don't believe that it's something that we need to vote on as an approved proposed fee schedule that needs to go to the council at this time. But this is the basic breakdown of the fee schedule. The current idea was to have 3 tiers of application fees based off of hours. Courses up to 4 hours would be 50, 4 to 8, 100, and anything over 8 would be just would be 250. So there wouldn't someone offering a course that's 30 hours would not have an incrementally adjusted fee that might be too much for them to bear, and so it would be capped at 250 for anything over 8. This proposal would have on-demand courses be $100 that are approved for 3 years, and anything that's a free course that's offered to all licensed members up to 2 hours would be free, and anything that's over 2 hours would only incur $25, and that includes an on-demand course. In our last meeting, we talked about having repeat programs eligible for a reduced fee, and that proposal would right now in draft is $25 for a course that was already approved prior in that same CLE year. Something for us to think about is if we want some sort of reduced fee, or if we want that repeat program fee to also apply to a course that was conducted live, but then wants to be turned into on-demand course. So, what kind of fee would we want to charge there? If we're, currently we've always kind of treated those as a repeat program needs to be the same format, but if that's something the board can consider for a fee schedule, if we want to have either a reduced fee for something that's already been approved material wise, but just wants to be created into a different type of product, on demand for that same course. I'll just briefly go through all of this and then open it up for any questions. The additional fees would be for on-demand recertification. We'll have to have the providers certify that the materials that they are still relevant and timely, and the law hasn't changed in a way to make them no longer useful for lawyers. And that would be $50, and then a $25 if it's one of those free on demands. And then we have application fee, for an expedited application if the sponsor is submitting something within 40 days of the program, and if they submit something after the program date, they'd have an additional, they'd have a $100 fee. This is when lawyers would be permitted to submit courses for approval that had not previously been approved by, submitted by a sponsor, and that would be a $15 fee for a lawyer to submit one of those courses for approval. That happens if they go to a conference or they take something that provider did not submit for North Carolina credit. The lawyer could still submit that for approval, and we have a cost of actually having to review those materials and administer that credit. So there'd be a $15 fee for a lawyer to do that. Attendance reporting, the rules ask that require that sponsors provide the attendance reports 40 days following the program. And if not, then there'd be a $25 late reporting fee. And if they are late on reporting a course that has already been approved, then the system will not allow a sponsor to submit another course for approval until they have satisfied their attendance reporting. One thing we'll have to figure out here in that process, and I think we can do that in our system, is making sure that providers know that they still might have to report 0 attendance on a course, because how would we know if it's really a late reporting or if it really was nobody attended? So they would need to have something in our system flags to let them check a box that says, no attendance to report or something like that to keep them timely in compliance. So that's the fees for sponsors and for courses. Down here is just a kind of a breakdown of what we have considered for compliance fees. Lawyers have would have the annual CLE attendance fee, and if it's late, then they'd have an additional $25 late fee that would all be applied during the dues process. A late compliance fee for lawyers who haven't completed their hours by the last day of February. A non-compliance fee for lawyers who have had to now have a suspension notice issued. And if a lawyer is actually suspended, then they would have to apply for reinstatement, and the reinstatement fee is $250. So that's this proposal. I think there are some areas for improvement. I think there are areas of concern that we've heard from some sponsors. One of them being, is there a way that we can look at a certified or accredited sponsor status that either provides a discount on CLE, for sponsors that provide a lot of CLE, and that's something that I think I would like the board's kind of permission. It doesn't have to be a vote, but just permission to look at that and come up with some potential draft language for you to look at. I think there's some value in that, and I have some I can share now. Well, I'll wait to see if there's questions. If not, I will share some information on that from other states and some potential ideas for how we could deal with create a registered or accredited sponsor status that provides value to the sponsor and to the state bar. We had a program, a registered sponsor program before, but it really it did not prevent those registered sponsors from being relatively non-compliant with some of our rules, and it didn't provide any value to the state bar, and really all it did was allow those sponsors to have presumed credit for those courses. And so we had proposed to eliminate that, and that's something that we might want to look at bringing back. Judge Dunstan, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Peter. As far as I think that's a great idea, start out with that piece. But I also have a question as far as, with the program application fee. So for example, for the professionalism for new admittees, those programs that we're requiring, and we want to encourage, bars and those kind of things to have those programs. And it's almost like those, of course, are 2 days, where they have to pay, $250 a host, those type of things that, like I said, for the people that are furthering what we're trying to do in increasing professionalism in our bar, as well as educating our new individuals. That was just something I thought about as well, which I think can help with that sponsored piece that you're talking about, or the registered sponsors. And then the only other thing is, and I'm sorry I have to leave in 15 minutes, but the only other thing I have a question about is, as the exemptions chair and committee, just wondering kind of what does that look like for individuals who, are asking for special conditions and those kind of things. And then what do the fees look like for those that are, practicing out of state, and how do we know that they're practicing out of state? Does that happen every 3 years, or do they have to recertify every year with that, or kind of what does that look like?
So the exemptions are going to be annual. And so the idea would be that, you claim that either during your dues process, or you can go into your portal and claim it anytime. And that really just takes away, it resets your reporting period each time you do an exemption. So if you did one, you'd then have a new reporting period, but you have to do it annually, that's the idea. I do have some proposed language to look at for kind of rewording the non-resident exemption to make it more clear. Right now it can be a little confusing, and so we just kind of looked at some language there that I can share with you before you leave, that makes that understand that that lawyer needs to be out of state for, my proposal is the 6-month period prior to claiming that exemption, not practicing in the state, and not representing North Carolina clients on matters related to North Carolina law, which is kind of the language of the rule now. It just is, it's not really delineated as to have to make sure you're doing all 3 of those things at the same time. And so I think this will make it easier to understand and easier for us to enforce. They claim that we'll look at the address they have on record to look if they are out of state. And we can't really prove a negative that they're not representing North Carolina clients, but that would be something that they have to claim to the bar, and we'd hope that they would be honest with it. The P&A idea is also a good one, and I think that could be something that I know that registered sponsors before needed to be registered to be able to offer the P&A, and so that might be something that ties into that, or it's something that we could potentially have a discount on the fee schedule for people offering programs like the P&A that we're requiring and needing people to offer for people to stay compliant. Julie? I think you're muted, Julie, if you're talking.
Sorry about that.
Okay, no problem.
In terms of a program that is initially a live program, but then will be converted to on-demand, do you submit separate applications there, or do you just submit the on-demand to cover the live presentation and the subsequent on-demand access?
The hope is that that our portal will allow you to submit the program and then check the boxes of the types that you want it to be approved for. And we'll have to determine what kind of additional fee will be for that on demand. If we're going to be approving the materials for one time, it makes sense that on demand might have a reduced fee if you're already submitting it for a live program. But the hope is that you would be able to do that in the portal without having to resubmit everything, and kind of just if you don't do them at the same time, but you decide you want to convert it later, you could go back to that initial application and kind of request that this be approved for on demand without having to resubmit everything. Or if you're doing it at the same time, be able to check 2 boxes and kind of deal with it all in one application.
Okay, and the second question is, when there are two sponsors involved, for instance, I'm collaborating with a title company to present a CLE, and they're submitting approval, but I will be getting a recording to use for on demand. So do we need two separate applications since there's two different sponsors involved?
I think in that situation, you probably would, since those are the little things we'll have to work out, kind of either, try to work some out beforehand and then try to work them out as we initially deal with them the first times.
Excellent, thank you.
Judge Keever?
I'm looking at this free to all licensed members programs. And I'm wondering when, and I would assume things like the Public Defenders Conference and the District Attorneys Conference would likely fall into those, but I'm not sure they're going to let any licensed member of the bar come to those conferences. So how would you deal with that?
So I met with, I did a presentation for the School of Government last month, and they did ask me about those kind of programs, to which most of the people attending don't necessarily need CLE credit for the judges' conferences, because they would be exempt. And so they haven't normally, they don't always apply for CLE credit with us. And they asked him if there were people there who wanted CLE credit, would they be able to submit that? And I think that's where they would be able to do that. The lawyers could do that themselves after the fact and submit things for credit, and that would be $15. But I think the idea for these free courses is that there's no registration fee. It's not, it's open to anyone to attend, and it's not based on whether you're just for a DA or just a prosecutor. Anybody could attend if they wanted. I think that's the general idea, is that this is not barring people from attending. Even if it's, I think the language says all licensed members. And so that I think that could be trouble, or that might prevent them from being able to use this for CLE credit if it's only open to DAs, or if it's only open to judges. I don't know if that would
With the conference
include them.
The Conference of District Attorneys and whatever the public defenders are called, they have a conference for the DAs every year, at which most of the DAs go to either they have like two conferences a year. And I don't know, it's been a long time since I did that, but that's where they get their CLE, is at the conference. And that's put on by the Conference of DAs. The School of Government may have people who teach that, but it's actually put on by the conferences. And I know they don't charge their folks. If they have if it's like the judges and there's a registration fee, it's for the food and not for the CLE part of it. So, that's what I'm concerned about, is those types of circumstances. And I know that's where the DAs normally get their CLE, is at those conferences.
Right.
And I agree.
They may also attend, the School of classes for other smaller things, but that's where they get that. So I think that would be a problem for them to say that they have to open that up to defense attorneys or other folks who might want to attend those conferences.
Yeah, or they'd have to pay, or just pay the course application fee. And I guess they could then include, instead of having, right now, I guess the DAs are paying that out of pocket for their credit hour fees. If the Conference of DAs is, we'll have to check, Deborah. I don't know if you know, does the Conference of DAs pay the credit hour fees for those courses now, or is that something that we're invoicing the individual lawyers for?
They pay up to 12 hours, and anything over that, we invoice the attorneys for.
So my guess, Judge Keever, if they are doing 12 hours and they're paying that for each lawyer, this would be a lot cheaper for them, even if they had to pay the $250.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I think that's a great point, because Judge Keever, I was piggybacking off of you as well. I was agreeing. I was like, ooh, that's going to be a lot for public interest attorneys. But like you said, if they actually would be saving a lot of money if they're only paying $250 for 2 days for 100 people or more to do it, so.
So this is any other questions on this now? I mean, I know that I mean, we're getting somewhere with it. I'm not afraid to share this. I've shared it. I've shared something like this or this with others already. And with something that we could certainly publish for people to make comment, but I don't know that we need to vote on anything yet. Because we have time to get it right, and there are going to be things that probably pop up.
So I had one other question, Peter, on
Okay.
the late reporting fee of attendance.
Mhm.
And it says no new programs will be approved. What if they've already got approved programs in the pipeline?
I don't think it would be feasible or really kind of doable for us and practical for them for us to kind of remove approval. I think that the intent would just be to have not submitting any new course applications until that's paid, because to also kind of remove that credit from a lawyer who's now already committed to that program and is
Right.
paid and signed up. I think that could create a lot of trouble. So I think it's really just the system would block them from submitting a new application until they've settled other attendance issues.
Thank you.
Judge, do you have your hand up for another question? Okay.
Yes, really quick. As far as us crunching the numbers, because I know, the Equal Access to Justice Commission relies on a large part of this and other entities, nonprofits, et cetera, and so forth. When we crunch the numbers, does it come out to be about the same, more or less, or we just don't know? How does it look?
Well, I tried. We've tried our best to come up with a way to really estimate what this will be, but it's really going to depend on the number of courses that the sponsors submit for approval, and anticipate there will be a decline from some of them because now they have to pay for these courses, where many sponsors would just submit thousands of courses, on-demand courses, and they're not having to pay anything unless someone takes the course, or even sometimes they're having the lawyer pay for that. So we anticipate a decline in somewhat of a decline in courses. We don't know for sure what that will be. I've looked at other states that have these kind of models and tried to go with the number of approved courses they have and tried to calculate that out. We have, half of our annual income just about would be covered by the annual CLE attendance fee. And so we're really needing to now cover the other half of the revenue as best we can with these course application fees. I think that this would, I don't think we need to go any lower for sure. And I think that this is probably as close as we can guess in terms of the right amount, but I think it's going to take probably 2 or 3 years for us to really see what effect this has and gauge the numbers. I will do I'll try to do a full kind of financial analysis for the next meeting to see if we're right on the money. I've done that informally. I'm looking at my documents right now. I don't know that I have anything saved that kind of shows what I expect this to bring in, but I have done it a couple times. But I'll do it again and have something for you guys to take a look at, so we can kind of show that we've the reasoning behind this.
Oh, thank you, Peter. And I would just say, just because I'm wondering, with us doing the $25 and you saying that, I mean, that's already a substantial drop from what is it, 43 or 6? How much are people paying now?
It'd be 42 a year.
42 a year now. And so, just like you said, figuring out, like, does it need to be 30 or 35? Like, because I'm a little worried that the sponsors are going to overcharge for people to be able to get their CLEs, because they're dealing with it on the back end versus with us on the front end, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
and it's gonna take years to gauge that. But.
Yeah, and the annual CLE fee is tricky, because while lawyers are considered paying, to be paying $42 a year in CLE attendance fees, a lot of lawyers don't feel that because they're paying their sponsors, and so we didn't want to overwhelm them with a high attendance fee that they're going to have to pay, because that will feel like a dues increase, because many of them aren't really even aware necessarily that their cost of practice really includes that $42 right now.
Right.
And so that's why we didn't want to overdo the annual CLE attendance fee. But you're right. I mean, I think even that's going to have to be something that we look at as this goes forward. I think there's an equal chance that we have overestimated and underestimated here.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know. I'll try to do my best financial analysis for us at the next meeting to kind of show why we think this is our best guess for what we should do.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. I'm sorry I have to roll, but thank y'all. Good to see you.
Thanks, Judge Dunstan. All right, Peter, anything else on the fee schedule as we kind of work through this?
No, not anything else right now. If you have any other questions or ideas or comments, please send them to me and we'll try to look at it and see what kind of tweaks we can make. But I think we can kind of go into the proposed rules, and I can show you a couple of the areas that we want to take another look at that I'd like to be able to bring you some draft language for at the next meeting.
Okay, go right ahead.
Great. So I've met with our staff and some sponsors and providers and other lawyers from based off comments, and we also received some comments and urging from the State Bar Council at the July meeting, and so that some of this comes from there as well. And so I'll just share my screen again real quick. So the first one that I mentioned to Judge, based off of Judge Dunstan's comment, was just try to kind of clarify what the non-resident exemption means. Right now, this is the current proposed rule that it says any active member residing outside of North Carolina who does not practice in North Carolina for at least 6 consecutive months and does not represent North Carolina clients on matters governed by North Carolina law shall be exempt from the requirements of these rules. It has caused confusion. This is one of those ones that we have to deal with a lot that can be very confusing. And so the kind of idea that I would like to draft up is here on the screen. Just kind of breaks it down a little bit better. May exempt an active member from these requirements if for at least 6 consecutive months immediately prior to requesting an exemption, 1, the member resides outside of North Carolina, the member does not practice in North Carolina, and 3, the member does not represent North Carolina clients on matters governed by North Carolina law. Just kind of makes it more clear that they have to satisfy all 3 of these requirements to get that non-resident exemption. That's kind of the idea that we're looking at there. The other part on the exemption is just a work. Oh, go ahead.
I
Go
just had
ahead.
a quick question on
Sure.
that, and I hadn't really thought about it, but for the third one, out of state, and they're not practicing North Carolina law, and 2 North Carolina clients, I'm wondering, I mean, if they're advising someone, whether they're a North Carolinian or not, on North Carolina law, seems like they're practicing law here. I don't know.
Yeah, it might be that that third one doesn't need both representing North Carolina clients, and maybe it can just it could say the member does not represent clients, would take out North Carolina on matters governed by North Carolina law.
Yeah, that seemed cleaner to me. If they're advising people on North Carolina law, no matter where they live, then they're practicing on some level in the state. I don't know. That was just a suggestion.
Okay, that's a good one. I'll highlight that. I think that's a fair suggestion, and I'll look into how we might be able to do that. But if we just kind of took North Carolina out of it, does not represent clients on matters governed by North Carolina law, that might be cleaner. The second exemption change to look at is just this the language of calling something senior status exemption. You know, our rules there is no senior status. You know, that's not something that our membership rules or anything really has. And so kind of just the proposed would be to maybe just take out the word status and just have it be senior exemption. It doesn't change what we're proposing as the requirements to get it. That's just a word change that I think might make things clear, because no one's really, you're not really on senior status. That's, there's not such a thing that we have. Okay, so the big one that came from the State Bar Council in July was the council was happy that we had reinstituted proposed carryover rule, but they didn't think that we'd gone far enough. And I think that there was a lot of effort. There was there's a lot of discussion on them actually amending the proposal to increase this to 12 credit hours right then at the meeting. I told them I'd like to at least come back to the board so we can discuss it. I will tell you, I don't have any real reservations to this. As long as we're only counting these hours as total hours towards their 36, it's not something that lawyers could satisfy their ethics or substance abuse requirements in a prior year. That's something they still have to take in the same report, in each reporting period. And so programmatically we can handle this. And if this is what is needed to end the carryover complaints, then I'd be fine with this. And I think it still serves that purpose that we talked about last time of letting lawyers, not disincentivizing lawyers from taking courses, letting them create that buffer that they would like, and still, not losing any hours for things that they have taken. And so I'm okay with moving it back up to 12, and that's kind of what I'm going to propose in the rule draft that I'll bring to you next month, if that's something that you guys are all okay with. But I will say I don't want to go any higher than that.
Yeah, I just can't see going higher than that. And the biggest issue is to make sure that they can't carry over 36 from year
Right.
1 to year 7. So I'm okay with 12, particularly because they can't use it for ethics, et cetera, as part of that.
The next one, and this is actually on our agenda. It's on item 4.1 on our agenda, and that's, what do we do? Is it our sponsors doing what they need to do to be able to verify that people are actually attending these on-demand courses and actually watching them in some way? And we had a request from Nancy Ferguson for us to look at this and see if we can provide, better guidance on what it means for interactive or to be able to verify attendance. And I'm going to take a look at this and see if there's some additional language we could look at here. I went to the CLE survey from the national survey and just got some language from what other states do. Some states require that the sponsor gets their method for tracking approved, or that they detail how they're tracking attendance in their course application. Some require that these courses contain attendance monitoring prompts inside the presentation that a lawyer would have to click to be able to continue and show that they're paying attention. I don't want to get into such a granular detail on what's required that we are unable to adapt to how technology changes in the future, but it might be something that we need some more clarity on in the rule that explains what these providers need to do to have satisfy that kind of attendance verification for these on-demand courses. I don't know which one, what the board might be interested in or how much detail you'd want, but I know that there's been there's certainly a broad range of what sponsors are doing to verify this. And we haven't really done a lot to check on what sponsors are doing in this area. So it might be something that we need to have a little bit more detail on. Marissa and then Judge Eggers.
I think that there was a discussion at another meeting several years ago talking about recording and verifying attendance. And the point was made at that time that perhaps you're just leaving it to the honesty of the attendees rather than the verification. And one of the reasons they said is that you really can't stop attendees who are in live programs from reading the newspaper and checking their emails, and that it might just be a lot more trouble than it's worth. Just
Right.
for
I
what
remember
that's worth.
that is one of the issues. I mean, someone might show up to a live CLE, but there's no guarantee that they're paying attention as it is now. Judge Eggers?
I agree with that. And frankly, the whole purpose, I thought part of being a lawyer is being trustworthy and honest and ethical, and that they need, the individual lawyer has an obligation, an ethical duty to report. And maybe we spell it out that maybe we need a rule that spells out that it's on, that it's an ethical violation if they are not paying attention, or if they are, you hate to state the obvious, but I mean, I don't see that it's productive, because there's people that check out all the time in the live CLE. So
That's right. Paul?
Yeah, on the other side of that spectrum, I think one reliable way to do it, probably the most effective, would be, so you're aware of obviously the in-course codes that you have to write down during certain portions of the presentation. I think that if you have that code and you also have a video that cannot be fast forwarded, which exists, you have to play it through. I think that would prevent anybody from trying to manipulate that fast forward. And so if you're trying to, it goes to what really the goal is. If we're trying to actually verify complete and full attendance, that's probably one way to do it effectively.
Judge, you have your hand up again, or is that just from last time, Judge Eggers? I think it might be from last time. Yeah,
last time, but I do want to bring up.
Okay, go ahead. Sure.
But when it comes to the fast forwarding, don't you remember we had somebody that says that they can listen so much quicker than the average bear? And I just think that ethically they have to report what they've done and or not done, and I just don't know how we can. I like what Mr. Capua is talking about, but it seems like an awful lot of trouble. Maybe we do both of them where they have to verify as well, but that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I'm going to look into this more and see if there's some more detail on some of these states and how they do it. I do like the idea of the language that says sponsor must detail continual attendance monitoring procedure in the course application, just so they at least have said how they're going to do it. I like the idea of codes that the lawyer has to get to be able to get the certificate of completion at the end from the sponsor. I think a lot of this just comes down to a matter of fairness based off of Nancy Ferguson's letter. There is a significant cost here to providers to have the platforms to be able to do this. And we want to make sure that everyone's being treated fairly. Some might be paying a lot of money to have a good verified system, and others might be getting the same benefit without doing anything. And so whatever we do, we need to have something that creates is fair to everyone and also is easily understood as to what we're requiring. And so I'll look into this some more for the next meeting and have a couple different proposals for you to look at. But I don't want to get to a point where I don't want to make this too onerous on the staff for approving courses, and too granular for the providers that they have this exact thing happen. I think something along the lines of what we have, but maybe with one additional sentence or something like that that makes it clear that they can, that they either need to explain how they're doing it or that they need to get something approved, get their process approved by the staff or something when they're getting their courses, submitting their courses. So the next one, Paul, I'm gonna go ahead and mute you real quick. Just the next one is the non-compliance section. It's a lot of it is just kind of clear. What I think we might need to do is just clarify some language, and then there's a second part that I think is substantive that we should discuss. So this is what's currently the proposed rule. We've set out these two things that the member could do to not be suspended, but I think maybe some better language would be something like the order shall suspend the member who fails to meet the requirements of these rules within 30 days after service of the order, unless, and really the only thing that they could do at that point is show good cause in writing why the suspension should not take effect. So they, because it says if they fail to meet the requirements of the rules within 30 days, we don't need to have that a second option of if they satisfy their requirements. The only thing other than meeting the requirements is showing good cause. And so I don't know that we necessarily have to have the 1 and 2 there in the proposal. Again, this is not something you have to vote on today. I'll have something for you to look at. The other part of this is that we had 2 kind of references to how this is going to be served in the rule. The current rule says the order shall be entered and served as set forth in Rule 0.0903D of the subchapter, and then goes on to explain how notice is going to be served. So the proposal that I'm looking at is just deleting that sentence about it'll be served as set forth in 0903, and just we have the service here in the language already. The second part of this whole thing, and I'll get back to the 30-day period here in a second, is the reinstatement provisions. We have a whole rule about how a lawyer could be reinstated. I think it would be easier if we have reinstatement dealt with in the administrative code like we are in the rules like we already do, and we would just have reinstatement as a paragraph under the non-compliance. It says suspended members must petition for reinstatement to active status pursuant to 0.0994 of the subchapter. So here's the reason why we had reinstatement separately before, because we had considered the idea that if you get a suspension order from us, you have 30 days to comply or show good cause, and then you go into the wind down period, and we allowed lawyers to get reinstated during that wind down period in a different manner than if they've already hit 30 days after the suspension. If like the wind down was done, we had created this whole big process for this. And I was talking to staff about this, and really the state bar considers you suspended when you're even if you're in wind down, you're suspended. I mean, you're suspended in wind down. Your status is suspended. And you need to be reinstated from that. It's not necessarily another 30 days to comply like nothing happened. I mean, you're already suspended. Your status shows suspended in the system, and really you should have to reinstate after that. And so then there's not necessarily this need to having this whole big multiple paragraphs for how this is all going to be handled, because it can be handled like any other reinstatement in the administrative rules. The problem with this, and this is where I get back to the 30-day period here that I've put in red, is the effect of this is the lawyers will end up with 30 days less time to comply under these new rules than they would have under the current rules. Because our current rules allow, we have a notice to show cause that goes out, and then they have 30 days to comply. And then they get an order of suspension that gives them 30 days to comply before they enter suspended wind down status. So they have 60 days of official time to comply. Under these rules, they'd have 30 days from that suspension order to comply, and if not, they'd be suspended. I am a little concerned at reducing that time or due process for lawyers, and think maybe we should consider making that 30-day period before they are suspended 45 days or 60 days or something, to have that time to where we feel we're not taking away too much substantive current, too much time that from the process, and feeling like we're not removing too much due process time for lawyers. And so that's something I would like you guys to think about. Like if we are saying once you're suspended, you just have to reinstate, then the lawyers really only have 30 days to comply once they've gotten that order, that notice of the order. Should that be a longer period of time for them to comply, because we're kind of reducing this whole process by 30 days as it is now. I don't know the answer to it, but it's a little concerning. They have 60 days following the end of February to comply before they get this suspension order, and then that suspension order would give them 30 days before they're suspended. That's 90 days. Should that be a little longer for them to comply? I don't know the answer, but it does strike me as something that maybe we should consider.
Peter, remind me, administratively, is the state bar sending a notice to each lawyer about, well, I know they are sending a notice about the reporting deadline. So we're giving them 60 days after that deadline to get things in order.
That's right, and ultimately, Dayton, it will be a little longer than 60 days before we actually were to send these orders out, because we have to wait. We'd have to wait until almost the end of March to really know who's in compliance or not. But they'd have 60 days from the end of February, and so that takes you to the end of April. What I think the plan would be is that at that April council meeting, we would go to the administrative committee and to the council for approval of sending these notices for anyone who does not comply by the end of April. Then we'd have to wait for those attendance reports to come in from sponsors. We can't just immediately send those things May 1st, because things, they have to be reporting attendance. And so we'd have to wait a little bit. Probably wouldn't be able to send these notices out, these orders out, until the middle of May or the end of May. And then you'd have 30 days from there, which puts you in end of June before the lawyer would be suspended. That is still a lot earlier than what they would be suspended, how they're suspended now. I think that probably happens in the fall. So it is something that we could, if we were to make it 60 days or even 45 days, the advantage there is that we could take a list to the council meetings and say, hey, these lawyers are about to be suspended from your district, give them a call. And that's what we've done in the past, where we have the counselors reach out to people who are about to be suspended and kind of try to get them to get into compliance. And so if this process were to last through that July council meeting, there would be that additional benefit of being able to notify our counselors that certain people are going to be suspended and they could take action. I don't think we are doing anything improper by the current proposal, but I do think that it might be beneficial to, we don't want to suspend people. And so if we can avoid it by giving that additional time, then that would be something that we could consider.
I guess I don't have any real objection to, going back, splitting the difference and giving 45 days or even going back to 60 days. But it seems to me that we're already giving people 60 plus days beyond the reporting deadline to get things in order. And to me, that's sufficient, but I'll go along with the majority of the council if you want to extend that 30 days to a longer period. I think the current proposal is sufficient.
Anybody else have any thoughts on that? Want me to kind of draw up a couple different proposals to you to take a look at, and then we can consider that at the next meeting? That's awesome nods there. So I'll do that. We'll leave this as is now, but I'll draw up some a couple different drafts for us to discuss with hopefully everyone attended there. So if that were to be the case, I think we'd be able to kind of just delete this entire reinstatement section and let this all be handled under the current rules of the administrative committee. So this is the one, the other thing that we had talked about a little earlier was, should we go back and take a look at maybe creating some sort of registered sponsor or accredited sponsor? The current proposal eliminates the idea of a registered sponsor, but I do think there might be some value in this. Many states have this and either it provides a discount for those registered sponsors, and they have certain eligibility requirements. If we can create something that provides value to both providers and the program, then I think there might be it might be worth taking a look at. A lot of states have like a one-time application fee and then an annual registration fee that can be pretty substantial. So it's not something that necessarily every provider would want to do, but if they are offering a lot of courses and they got some sort of discount for being a registered provider, then I think it would incentivize some sponsors to go that route. Whatever we do, I want the rules to make it clear that this is the discretion, the discretion of the board, and they need to have shown a history of complying with the rules and cooperating with the program, because we don't want everyone to be a registered provider and still kind of flout the process and be difficult to deal with. We want this to be for providers who have shown that history of compliance and a history of providing a certain number of minimum courses, perhaps a number of minimum live courses in North Carolina. I'm going to look at all the different states and kind of see what the options are and bring you some proposals, but I think there might be some value in this for everybody if we can try to get it right. But the last iteration of it didn't really work very well. There was no annual fee for the registered providers, and there really was no real way for us to ensure that those providers were actually complying with the rules once they became registered. And so we need to have a good process for this if we're going to go this route. Does anybody have any thoughts on this?
I like the consideration, so thank you.
Sure.
Do we, excuse me, do we want to give sponsors the ability to advertise their programs in a way where they can say they are accredited by the state bar?
Yes, I think that would be one of the things that they could do is hold themselves out as a registered sponsor. It also gives them that kind of presumptive approval on courses, so they can advertise that there's these are worth a certain amount of CLE credits, and some states actually just say you don't have to, they actually limit what needs to be submitted for an approval from their accredited providers, that they're not required to submit all the materials. They have to maintain those to be able to be audited, but they don't have to submit everything. They just have to submit it at kind of a much more narrow outline of what they're doing, and they get presumptive approval. I don't know that we want to go that far, but I do want this to be a two-way street. Whoever, there needs to be a benefit to the providers and us, and we got to find that right kind of Goldilocks zone on that, in terms of an annual fee and the eligibility requirements, and then what does the sponsor get out of it? What's the value? And so I think I'm going to come back with a proposal for that for us to take a look at in October.
I may be stumbling over semantics, but I'm wondering what the difference is between a registered sponsor and an accredited sponsor.
There isn't one, date, and I'm just using them interchangeably right now. We used to have an accredited provider back in the day, and then we changed the language to a registered sponsor, a registered provider, when we changed the rules. So I think my brain just kind of uses them interchangeably, but whatever we choose to call it, that would be the idea, that they are get some sort of status, whatever we name it. We have like a minute left, so I thought, Judge, maybe we could, I know that there's a couple of different items on the agenda that I know we need to get to. I do think 4.4 is probably an easy decision for the board if we wanted to talk, which was someone requested to be able to be exempt from the technology requirement because they have a technology background. That wouldn't be consistent with how we've dealt with anything else. I mean, we don't allow ethics lawyers to get exempt from ethics credit, or substance abuse providers and clinicians to be exempted from that. And so I know I'm hopeful that the board would agree with me that might be a relatively easy decision. Judge?
I just want to say, it's like the guy that can speed read so much faster than everybody else. The same deal. You need a motion?
Right.
I'll make a motion that we turn that one down. You'll be much more eloquent on wording it for me.
Sure. Yep, Judge, you're muted. Judge Keever, you're muted. Judge Keever, you're muted. Are you talking to someone else? Okay, sorry.
I'll second that motion.
She's saying that she cannot, she can't. click
Okay.
mute.
Yeah, I'm trying to ask, but I guess you can't do it. Okay. In Judge Keever's absence, Judge Eggers is the vice chair. Do you want to call that question? I think she is. Maybe it's Marissa. Is it Marissa?
I think I'm not the.
Oh, okay.
It's Adrian Peter.
Oh, Adrian's not
and
here.
she's
Okay.
not here, right?
Well.
Oh, well, I will take it upon myself and
sure.
my judgely duties to say that I will call the question, and that have Mr. Bolick properly phrase it for purposes.
Okay, I'm now unmuted.
All right, great.
Good. We'll let the expert take over. Go right ahead.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of denying his request indicate by raising your hand. Thank you. That's taken care of.
And Judge, there are two other items on that other matters that we should look at a subsequent meeting. And I'll send this information to you to look at. One is how do we deal with teaching credit for panel members? Our current policy is that we divide the presentation by the number of panel members when applying speaker credit, teaching credit. Judge Robinson had sent a letter, it's in your materials, about should we change that? I did some research on what other states do. It varies, but we're not out of the norm on how that's dealt with. So I'll send this for you to take a look at for a future discussion. And then as it relates to the Board of Law Examiners request, I do think that's kind of an important substantive one for us to talk about, amending the P&A requirements to have substantive teaching involved. And I'll be able to I'll give you a survey of what other states require their new admittees. I think that is something that we need to make sure we give enough time to discussing, because that certainly is going to impact providers who are already trying to fit all this in a 2-day period. And whether that's something we think is in line with the idea of what our professionalism course, is intended to do. And so, but we should have that discussion when we have more time to do it.
So, and that's fine. Do you want to try to set a date right now, or do you want to?
I don't want to hang anybody out. What we'll do though is we'll send something out this afternoon to try to get a date set. So we don't have to haggle over it. And we ended up getting a good attendance today. If we can get another good attendance meeting to look at these proposed rules, it'll likely have to, the goal would be that we could meet sometime before the State Bar Council meets in October, so we could have something, if we have proposed amendments that we want to bring to them, that we could bring to them at that meeting to take a look at.
Right. Okay, well, try to get something out this afternoon so that folks can get it on their calendar, because it's not that far away.
Okay.
Anything else from anyone? Yeah, and I'm sorry about that, but they have 3 monitors in front of me and the cursor wanders around.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't get it to come to where you really want it to be. So anyway, next time I might be at home, and that will solve all these problems. All right. Thank you all. And we'll get back with you.
Thank you all very
Bye,
much.
everybody.
Bye.
Good seeing you.